Hello everybody and welcome to this Blender tutorial at cgcookie.com. My name is Claas Kuhnen and today I'm going to give you a quick run through how you could model the shoe with Blender. Before we start modeling, I would like to spend a moment setting up the scene. First, I'm going to place background images into different views like top, bottom and side view. This will help serve as a blueprint for referencing proportions. For the file type, I'm going to use PNG with transparent backgrounds, so I will only see the outline of the shoe sketch when modeling. As a tip, I would also only use colored sketches, as a color greatly helps in visually separating the sketch outlines from the 3D mesh. So let's get started. I'm going to Layer 1, Top View. To add an image to the background, you can press N to turn on the Property panel. Click on Background Images to activate that function. Click on Open. And I'm going to start with the top sketch. Zoom out a little bit. Now, I really would like Blender to only show this image when I'm in my top view. To do this, you can go to the axis and select top. Now I'm going to add another image. Let's say I'm going to use bottom. And also here, I would like the bottom image only to be visible when I'm inside the bottom view. So I go to the axis menu and select bottom. Now I have to select the next image, the last one, select side. And this one I'm going to map actually to the front, simply because the way how I have my sketches lined up, the shoe is actually horizontal and not vertical. So when I press 1 into the front view, I see the shoe from the side. So that is step 1. Step 2, I actually have to set up the scale of my scene. So I'm going to the Scene button, click on Units, click on Metric. I'm personally work mainly in metrics, and the reason for that is it is actually important that you set up your units correctly, because you want to model a product like the shoe in scale. And when you later are going to use modifiers, for example like the Solidify Modifier, and you add a material thickness, you want that, for example, 2 millimeters of material thickness in the solidifier is really 2 millimeters inside your Blender model. With having this done, we now have to scale the background images also into the correct scale. To do this, I'm going to add a cube first. The reason why I added the cube, I'm just only going to use it as a reference object, because my shoe I have is roughly 29.5 centimeters long. So I'm going to enter 25 centimeters and 29.5 centimeters. Last time, 0.5 centimeters. Okay. So you see that the sketch is actually way too big. Now I have to adjust the size of those sketches. And I can start with the side, maybe put in 1. As we see, even a size of 1 is still too big, maybe 0.1. That's a little bit too small, maybe 0.15. And that's actually getting closer, 0.5. That seems to be pretty good. And now, as you see, I have to move the image a little bit to the right, maybe 3. Yeah, that works pretty good. This value, the size, I can actually now take and copy to my other views. Simple copy and paste. And also here, I have to move the image a little bit to the right. And my bottom view. And also here, as you see, I need to move it over just a notch. It's actually a bit too much. So this is pretty good. If you like to go one step further, you can, instead of using only two-dimensional images as your blueprint in the background, also use 3D models like a foot or, for example, a shoe last as three-dimensional volumes over which you could start sketching your object. And what you see here is the shoe last I used for modeling the shoe. And you see also that my background sketch has actually a very straight sole. And my final computer model actually has a deformed sole. So I would actually advise you to start first working with a sketch that has a very straight layout. And then once you have all your proportions done, then you could start deforming the sole and the shoe, for example, like bending the tip up. And before we get started modeling, I'm also going to move that image a little bit upwards because I would like to have the bottom part of my sole actually lined up with the ground plane. So let's get started, but as a heads up before, because the shoe is actually too complicated to be finished modeling within 45 minutes, I'm going to limit this demonstration on showcasing the basic beginning steps and then what you have to look out for, showing you specific techniques and approaches, and then at certain times, properly, I will switch to more refined model stages. So this way you can get a good overview of how I would start and where I would also stop modeling. Okay, so let me switch into the top view. I'm going to start with a plane, which I'm going to scale down so that it actually will roughly include my sketch. And let's bring those edges down and this edge up. Okay. And now I'm going to add few loop cuts. And I'm going to select 7. It seems to be the right amount of loop cuts. I will actually have to add a few more local subdivisions later in the modeling process. And you might ask yourself how I decide 7. And it's basically a question about how curvy or how straight the surfaces of your shoe are. Everything which is straight properly will need less loop cuts. Areas which are very curved or tight curved need more local subdivision. And through experience and working through it, you will just at one point see when you need to add geometry. So I would actually advise you to start rather with a low polygon model, because it's a lot easier to modify a low amount of vertices compared to a large amount, because you could still afterwards add more detail. So with 7 points, I feel pretty comfortable. In addition, I'm going to add a subdivision surface modifier, and then the following step, I'm going to push and pull my vertices up and down, so that my outline starts lining up with my background sketch. And as a tip, try not necessarily pull those points right onto the blue line, because you might have to readjust previous moved points when you continue working through your vertices. So like here, I have to move it back. And there, and there. Actually, for the moment, I'm going to turn this one on so it's easier to see the actual outline of my surface. The point has to go up a little bit, this goes down, this can go down, and actually those can go a little bit to the left. Maybe there. This might go down. Yeah, that looks pretty good actually. this one's a little bit too flat. Okay, so I'm going to duplicate this and copy it onto another layer just for backup. And then I go into side view, select everything, move it slightly up, because in the next step I'm going to try to line up the vertices with the upper profile curve of my sole, like this. Okay, so this actually looks pretty good. At this stage I can actually get rid of those edges, so I only deal with this outline. I'm going to turn off that feature again. Okay, so in the next step I can press E to extrude this one up, maybe till here, and then I'm going to select, and that's just guessing, yeah, those points, and hit E for extrude again and move it up a second time, because I'm going to adjust those points now to the upper profile. And you might already see that this way it's a little bit difficult to hit all points directly to a profile curve. So there, for example, you can see already where I might need to add additional loop cuts at one point. This one I move in a little bit. Okay. The reason why I did not extrude those edges was because this part I'm later going to simply fill. I don't need a lot of detail there, but I'm going to need a lot of detail, for example, along this line, because, for example, as you can see here, I need to push this surface in. Let's delete this frame again. Okay. So, in a top view, I'm going to select those points, and just so it's easier to see them, I use a simple scale, and then I move those to there. Those I scale of S, Y, and 0 into a straight line. Okay, so that looks pretty good. For example, right here you see I have a real issue in pushing that geometry to there, so I need to add another loop cut here so I could reach that curve. And also when you add loop cuts, keep in mind, for example, this section got more straight now because the amount of vertices is denser. So try to keep an eye for that and try, if possible, even out the curvature a little bit. And I do this by spacing out my points just a little bit. Up here I keep them the same because there I need them to be close to each other so I can get that tight change inside the profile curve, but here I don't need it. Actually, let me make this one a green color so I can see it better. Okay, let's move this one to there. This goes up a little bit. That one is okay to there. Those two I move together a little bit to there. There I start seeing already how it's starting to take shape a little bit. Maybe those can go to there. Those are the middle parts. Okay, yeah. Okay, same issue I have also in this area. So I'm going to add a loop cut there as well as here, because now I can select those points, move them to there. This one can go to there. And then again, from it's at the top view, I might have to adjust the positioning of those points a little bit. I think those can go now a little bit closer together, trying to increase the spacing between the points. And to there, and to there. Okay, so when you model the shoe, it's really trying to find a balance between the just needed amount of subdivision and so you could try to reach as much detail as possible. You will not be able to really model all the fine details of a shoe simply because that then basically you would need to use a sculpting tool for it, because it's just too dense and too detailed. So I'm now going to, at this point, filling those faces. And for example, as you can see, this part I'm going to move to there. This part I'm moving to here. So, and those could scale in just a little bit. This could go over, and this could go over. And then maybe, let's see how this looks like. Maybe one loop cut here, because now I could dent this one out a little bit. Those I can move back. Those I could move a little bit to there. And also keep in mind from the side, those parts also stick out a little bit. Like this, and the same here. Let's see how this looks like. Yeah, so it starts taking a good shape already. Let's shade this smooth so it's nicer to see. I have to correct the normals. And also a nice tip, and again, why you should work really with a low polygon model: move your mesh very often in shaded view, and then pay attention to, for example, as you can see, here is a shadow line, there's a shadow line, and try to spot if there are any dents or depressions inside your mesh you might need to get rid of. Okay. Now it's time to put in a little bit of more detail. For example, I would like to have a loop cut somewhat like this, so I could model in this curvature. To do this, no wait, before I do this, I'm actually going to simply remove that edge. I'm going to put in a loop cut, maybe roughly like there. Okay. Now, from a side view, I could move this one to there. This one can go up maybe a little bit. Just readjust some of those curves. And as you see, quite often when you add details, as I said, can quickly turn into readjusting your vertices, because when you work with the subdivision modifier, every time when you add a loop cut, your curvature changes. I'm also going to delete those faces for the moment, and the reason is because those two edges on each side, I'm going to extrude and scale down a little bit. Maybe like this, and that looks good. Those I move over, and then I'm going to fill the faces in, and those points I'm going to merge at last. Okay, so I just basically reconfigured that the way how the loop cut was flowing. And well, those points have to be a little bit elevated. And as it looks like, those points are a little bit too high. That means also those are a little bit too high, because there I would like to keep the distance here and here a little bit equal. Just a little bit of fine tuning. Let's shade this one smooth. Okay, that doesn't look too bad. Those points I added, for example, those I'm going to elevate a little bit. And if you pay closer attention to your shoe, you will see that sometimes kind of this part is more flat. So which is why I'm moving actually those points slightly up a little bit. And I think those maybe, let's go into shaded view, together with those points. I'm also going to move over just a little bit, because like this is kind of like should be a straight line. Let's compare this to the reference shoe I have. And yeah, it's getting close. Like there. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Let's see what we could fine tune here a little bit. Don't really like this position too much. Those could go over to there. Okay, so let's see. And again, this trick, rotating the shoe, trying to take a look at the shading. Do you see any bumps? Does it look nice and smooth? Actually, so far that looks quite good. How does it look from the bottom part? Yeah. So by knowing that from my shoe, those parts, actually they have to go out a little bit. So the sole curvature is like of the loop cut I selected is very close to the sole, but then the next one has to go out a little bit because your part of your foot actually is going to press this out. Where's the foot model? Yeah, for example, you can see how this is nice and curved. But then looking from here, this part, that's what's going to press out part of your shoe. So from a top view, this should be, for example, somewhat straight. Not too much, you can still have a little bit of curvature in it. Yeah, like this. Sometimes those are the small details that really show if somebody really understands shoes and really looked at all the intricate details how a shoe looks like compared to a shoe which looks good on the first look, but then you start noticing that there are kind of like some inaccuracies in it. Okay, this I don't really like too much. Yeah, this looks better now. Let's work on the sole for a moment and get that one started. So to get the sole started, I'm going to select that lower loop cut, Shift D to duplicate it, P to separate it, and then I'm going to move it to a second layer so it's easier to work on. Going to edit mode, press E, move everything down a little bit. Then I can press S to scale, Z to restrict it along the Z axis, press 0, and this way restrict everything to be lined up. Okay, move it down just a little bit further, and then slightly maybe scale it. The side looks good as well. I don't want too much slender. This maybe here is a little bit too much, so I'm going to move this just a notch back. Here actually I would like this to be a little bit further there. Okay, let's select everything, shade smooth, fix the normals, and yeah, that's pretty good. Okay, now the top part, I'm going to press E to extrude. I'm going to actually model a small insert, and because this part of the sole is actually hidden, it doesn't really matter too much if you see it or not, or if there are not, sorry, if there are like some modeling inaccuracies inside, because that part of the mesh you're not really seeing because it's going to be hidden by like the top part of your shoe. And because Blender doesn't have a very good offset tool, I just have to by hand readjust some of those points, trying to make this distance a little bit more even across the board. Yeah, maybe like this. Okay. And then I'm going to fill in the missing faces. Maybe from the top view it's easier. Yeah. So you see the sole is actually not really a difficult part. It's done pretty fast. And this edge, I could actually, if I want to, add another loop cut, but you see that, for example, here and here, the distance is different, so the edge sharpness will be different. Because I don't really want that, I'm actually not going to use a loop cut. In this case, I'm going to use the creasing, and maybe with 0.8. So not too sharp, it's a rubber part, it can't be razor sharp. 0.8 seems to be kind of like a good value. The nice part is because it's just a numeric entry, I can always go back and change it afterwards. Then here I do the same. Press E to extrude. And maybe this time I'm just scaling everything along the y-axis first. And then I have to do a little bit of manual touch-up. So I'm going to deselect all those points because this one here I have to move in. That one and this one has to go down a little bit more. You could, for example, also use the Solidify Modifier to build the offset, but it's a little bit cumbersome and a lot of extra steps involved. So in that case, I found it to be quicker, but simply doing it by hand, manually. And I'm sure that with BMesh soon being done, we also will, in a matter of time, have a really good offset tool, which will do this modeling task just for us. Okay, Then here I will close some of those faces as well. But as you see, I left the first face actually untouched because I would like the sole to be bendable. And I'm just going to show you which way I mean that. So from a side, I would like, of course, this front part to move up. And from a front, I would like the sole to slightly dip down or arc like this. So I have to add also the geometry for that. So I'm going to add 2 loop cuts. And now, thanks to n-gons, I can simply fill those. And just for demonstration purpose, if I select those faces and go into the front view and just gently move it down, there you get your deformation. And actually, as it looks, that was not really a good idea. The n-gon here is too big, so I'm going to remove this face and go the triangular approach so that, yeah, this is a little bit better. And this part will remain flat, so I'm not going to bend it up. So I'm just undoing everything till there. And now I can select those, delete those faces, and then quickly patch those faces in. Same here. Okay, and last part, this lower edge wants to be creased, of course, as well, 0.8. Okay, that looks good. And actually, the sole is not necessarily super straight, so I would like those be moved backwards a little bit. So I am creating a small curve there. And also from here, I'm going to scale it a little bit. Okay, and see how this looks with the shoe on top. So it looks pretty decent. Okay, let's go back to the shoe, the top part, and continue working on more finer details. I'm going to select this upper edge and then press E to extrude, press Escape, and I'm going to just slightly scale those parts, maybe along the x-axis. Okay, the reason why I do this is simply because at this point we have to start building the geometry for actually starting to build the stuff so we can model the thickness into it and also straighten those parts out. This actually I would like to go a little bit more like this, and maybe this one can go back a little bit. Okay, so those are a little bit more straighter lines. And this part, for example, has a lot of thick padding, so I'm going to move this a little bit more further in, and maybe so it's easier to see. I'm just switching to this view mode. It's actually not really a lot better to see. So fail. Let's go back to this view. And there, yeah. But this one is a little bit too far in. The padding is not going to be so thick. This one can go a little bit to there. maybe there. This one maybe to there. There. Okay. So you can go to there. At this part, we are basically ready to start building a material thickness into our shoe. And the easiest way is actually to use the Solidify Modifier. So I'm just, for modeling purpose, duplicating this on a third layer. Go to the Solidify Modifier. I'm turning off rim because I don't really want that actually to work. And I'm going to set this first onto 2 millimeters. So it's really, really tight. Maybe it's actually a little bit too thick, 1 millimeter. Because later on top of this we're going to add another 1 millimeter material, so that actually doesn't look too bad. I'm going to apply this now. And the reason why I didn't want the those parts to be filled, the rim, is so it's easier for me to really judge the thickness here. Because afterwards I only have to fill in a few faces. Which, for example, I could start doing now. Okay, that 3D witch is in my way. And just continuing the same everywhere as well. Simple edge select and then fill in the missing face. And as you see, and that's not really very time consuming, and we are done. Okay, now let's shade it smooth. And of course, we don't really have kind of like an overhang like this. This whole part is a little bit thicker. So now I would have to go in and change it a little bit. And for that, I'm going to select those faces and hide them. Because now from a side, I can, for example, select those faces. And let's see, yeah. So they, for example, have to go down quite significantly. The same here, and the same, I think, yes, those are the correct points. Let's go back into solid view. There we see how this part now starts bulging out a little bit, and maybe those points here I'm going to move a little bit to there to just increase that, yeah, puffiness like a pillow. And of course I have to do the same also from the back. So those faces here are starting to limit my view a little bit, so I'm going to hide those as well. So I can select, for example, this one and move it to there, this one I can move it to there. Same here and there. Just moving them down and then slightly scale them towards each other. those two seem to stick out, so I'm scaling them towards each other as well. So let's see. Okay, yeah, it doesn't actually look too bad. Yeah. So that's basically, I would say at this moment, everything you need to know about how to model the shoe and also how to model the show. And now let me show you how we start working on generating the leather parts which are then sewed over the shoe. So let's get started working on those blue side strips first. They're actually the easiest to build. All we need to do is have the face snap element turned on, and we're going to add a plane. I'm going to scale it down a little bit. Then in edit mode, I'm going to rotate it. Now I'm leaving edit mode, going to object mode, because I'm rotating my 3D object, because I'm actually using the local space. So now you can see when I select this edge, I can comfortably just reposition it like this. And this way, it's easier to just move those points along the direction I really need instead of just straight up or down. So I'm going to add 2 loop cuts because I would like the lower points to line up with the lower edge of my shoe. And could go down just a little bit more, maybe to there, and to there. And for example here, I am just adjusting them a little bit like this. Okay, and then I'm going to flood this area with a decent amount of loop cuts. You don't need too many. We also need more than 2, because that surface now you want nicely to flow over that shoe model. So, but before I do that, I'm going to move this object out so it's in front, and I can select everything. Also make sure that you have this option turned on so that when I project this onto the surface, all selected points are being snapped at the same moment. But as a tip, before you do this, save. Blender likes to crash currently with bmesh. And now to project it, I simply press G and Control, and you see it already snaps. See, if I if I release the Control key, it snaps back to the original position. So I just click the Control key, click mouse, and all points are projected. I mean, this is just perfect. Let's take a look. Those points are behind the blue line. That's pretty good. This one here, maybe I could move down a little bit, G and Control. Okay. Now let's select everything and shade it smooth. Also, so it's easier to identify what is what, I'm going to give this a blue modeling color for the moment. And I'm also adding a subdivision surface modifier. Okay. After the one added, I'm also going to add a Solidify modifier because I would like that part to stick out a little bit, and going to maybe 1.5 millimeters. Material thickness, no, 1.5 millimeters, not meters. That's a little bit too much. We have to work with the offset, so it's correct. It moves away. Actually, maybe 1 millimeter might be sufficient. Okay, and we can add an edge split. Okay, so here, for example, now you see why at the beginning I said it's really important that you set your unit system and you really work in scale if you want to make meaningful use of values which are based on like scale, like the thickness. Okay, so this part is basically done. We could quickly maybe duplicate it. Let's hide this, let's save, and simply project it onto the other side. Pressing G and Control. Blender didn't crash, that is nice. Now I have to change my offset, and yeah, perfect. Great. So you see, that wasn't really very difficult. Those edges are a little bit rounded right now. That can be later fixed either by, for example, using the crease function or adding more, for example, another loop cut. Let's do that for a moment, like this. And let's go G and Control. And now we're going to do the same on this part. Loop cut, oh, wrong part. Loop cut, Control R, move it down, G, Control, click. Okay. And maybe just to make sure that we don't have any issues, we can do the same up here. Control G to snap it, and the last part here. Control G, done. Perfect. Okay, so to build those parts, we can actually make use of the original shoe model. I'm going to move this one away. I have, for example, those faces already selected. Could Shift D, duplicate them, press P to separate them, move them out, and also here I'm going to give this a material color, and it slightly really sits on that surface, which is actually quite nice. Maybe those points want to be up just a little bit. I'm actually going to select, hold on. Yeah, I'm going to select those points. Also pressing here, G and Control, snap it. But to model the correct curvature, I need to adjust just a little bit. Also, this part is way too big. As you can see, for example, it has to be scaled down. So, for example, those points, I'm going to move down, going till there. Same here. There, there. Maybe at this point it might maybe be easier to move this up a little bit, so we have a better overall overview of how that shape looks like. For example, this one can be moved in a little bit more. The one can go down. This one can go in a notch and a notch. Okay. Also, this one is too wide. Not too wide, too long, so I'm going to add loop cuts and then chop those parts off. And at this point, maybe, let's see, say first, we could, with G and Control, snap it back down. That looks pretty good. I'm going to add Solidify Modifier 2 millimeters here because that part is actually thicker. Going to move it to the outer part. Oh, interesting. Those points didn't move down. Hold on. 1 second. Let's add the edge split. Maybe those little refusers we have to adjust them by hand. Yeah, of course, that makes also perfect sense because those points are lying outside their regular, there's no mesh below, so there's something they can actually really snap to. But if you take a look at your shoe model, you will notice that those parts are actually a little bit more inside. So I'm going to move those just a little bit, kind of like to there, so that they expose the underlying shoe material just a little bit. So like this, maybe this step more. And as you see, this one doesn't really look very good. Same here. It's difficult to get the details, so I'm just adding a little bit more of geometry by locally subdividing those parts, and then I can select all those again. And let's say first, go back into edit mode, G, control, dang, see, much better. And then of course in the next step I could start pushing those back slightly a little bit. And now seeing from the top part, now those are actually okay. Those have to go back just a little bit. G and control. G and control. Actually, hold on, this one. I would like to move a little bit more to there. And I'm going to move this one up. G and control. Okay, perfect. Same here. Move it up slightly. G and control. There. Okay, so as you see, that's the basic start in how you can start modeling those parts over it. And let me go back to my finished model already. You see how, for example, it has some edge curvature here, and I have a lot more geometry locally added than, for example, the shoe has. So that's another element, for example, we have to do. So those edges here, which I'm going to select, maybe they have to be more like there. And then those edges, they should go to here. And maybe again, those should go to there. And there you start seeing how we're starting to carve out this nice shape. And then, of course, we have to reproject those faces against the shoe. G, control, and there, Blender crashed. Let's quickly reopen it. Sorry for that one. As I said, save, save, save. It's very important. Blender is very touchy when it comes to the snapping tool. The snapping tool is actually really great. I'm very happy they have it in there because it is a very big time saver in many areas. But as working with development builds, it's not always the most stable environment. So crashes can happen. And control, I'm just doing it now one by one. So and let's take a look at it. Other side here, this one goes down a little bit. There, there. Yeah, unfortunately now those two shapes are not really similar at all. This one has shorter lip, which means this one here has just to go up a little bit there. Save. So with this, we have reached the end of modeling part 1, and I will welcome you back for modeling part 2 here at cgcookie.com. See you then. Bye bye.